So the article that I had shared last week, which is a short article, it's 11 pages, but a few pages of it are graphics, and it is written in a language that is easy to read, and I hope that you have read it and found it interesting, because it offers a way to combat this structural sexism, and it offers a way to reduce that, specifically in relation to women who work on executive level and like upper management levels. And it talks about how the systematic problems in talent management, meaning in how women are recruited for such jobs, and it offers a new way to look at how this process can be altered so that the gap between men and women in that level of positions is reduced. And we're just going to look at it briefly, some of the aspects that are important from that article. But before we do, just a quick note that these two terms may emerge from here and there, and you don't have to memorize these definitions, because gender equality is like you understand it, and this is just so that sort of point out that gender equity is different from gender equality, and these two definitions you don't need to memorize, but just know because it helps in sort of like if you're not familiar with the distinction, it helps with understanding the article better. So gender equity, and this is the definitions that the United Nations Population Fund uses. Gender equity, we're referring to the process of being fair to women and men, and using strategies to ensure fairness, and that there are like ways to compensate for women's historical and social disadvantages. And equity leads to equality, and equality is, I'm sure you understand what this means, but basically these two are related, and they're different. Whenever you see the word equity, gender equity is talking about fairness, but it's also talking about fairness in terms of having the tools to grow, to sort of have the ways that you can have freedom and fairness, in that if you are good at your job, you get compensated for it as you should, and you don't get discriminated or ignored because of your gender. Alright, so this is the article. I have highlighted the parts that I'm going to be talking about, or like pointing out, in this video, just as insights that are important to remember. But basically, the idea of the article is here. So here's the problem they propose, which is about women making about half of the college-educated workers in the United States, but they remain dramatically underrepresented in positions of power. And as you can see, just 8% of Fortune 500 companies are led by women, and less than 1% are by women of color. So, and then this is like what they sort of find out, their findings, and then a solution that they propose. So what they did is that they surveyed more than 150 female executives in a wide range of businesses around the globe, and they found a strong agreement that gender bias and structural disadvantage are still impeding women's success and working people's management at all stages. So basically, this article shows that what we talked about in terms of structural sexism is an illustration of that, because it shows how systematically women have been excluded from even being able to apply and be considered for positions of power in companies. And it talks about, it gives a lot of readable insights about what challenges there exist for women, and it offers solutions. So for that reason, it's a really interesting article, and I hope that you have read it and enjoyed it. In terms of the exam, you will get about 1 or 2 questions, but don't worry about memorizing any details or anything like that. Anything that is important in this article, it's good to remember, and you can get some cues in terms of what I am sort of highlighted and I'm referring to here. But you don't have to memorize the article. As long as you know the main ideas, you should be able to answer the couple of questions. 1 or 2 questions may appear on the exam. So basically, it's offering a sort of like a solution to the problem that it raises. And the problem is that, as I mentioned, it's laid out here. You can read about it. And the solutions that it offers is like a 7 main areas of talent management that it proposes to make adjustments for, so that women have more chance of applying for jobs that are considered positions of power. And we see that men predominantly occupy. Also, so it goes through these different seven stages, and it talks about how it is proving all of these stages that it's claiming are important for women's success. So its main goal is to narrow the gender gap, and it's claiming that narrowing this gender gap should be a deliberate and ongoing and systematic approach. And again, with these 7 sort of like strategies or 7 stages of adjustments to talent management, it is offering a solution for people to consider eliminating this. And at the end, it mentions that it's this article, and the argument is not only useful for you if you are a CEO or a company. You don't have to be someone like that to care about what's being said here. Is that any of you might be in such positions of hiring women who are going to be executives or in higher positions, first of all, but also that as a colleague, as a person who works in an environment, you can be cognizant about these barriers and these systematic practices that keep women out. So the first one talks about how even in terms of attracting candidates for positions that are considered like executive level positions, women are being weeded out. So like qualified women are sort of like being excluded even from when the job descriptions are posted, because it is talking about how when the job descriptions for job positions that are on executive level or more important, more integral to the company, uses descriptions that are traditionally masculine characteristics. And it talks about different studies that prove these points, right? It talks about how, for example, like a study on Canada's top 2 employment websites found that occupations where men predominate have job announcements that lay out stereotypical masculine characteristics as things that are wanted, and it keeps women out from applying to those jobs. Whereas for those who were women, predominantly the announcement used stereotypically feminine terms. It talks about hiring employees as the second stage of talent management process, where it talks about how the gender bias is present in the practice of recruiting employees. And this is an important point, where it says in acknowledging that a pattern such as that is present is critical, because it's the first step in raising awareness and taking action against this and trying to be impartial as possible. And it talks about how by removing information about candidates' gender through blind auditions and anonymized resumes has been shown to increase the proportion of women who advance in an application process. And it talks about how women, because they are thought to be maybe mothers or maybe too nourishing, get penalized in these processes. Integrating newcomers is another stage in the talent management process that's calling attention to, and it's talking about a very important aspect actually. And this is one of the reasons that this article has, in my opinion, has a very fresh lens towards how we can reduce the gender gap systematically, because it's talking about basically having, if you hire someone and they're the only employee of color and they're on an executive level, it's going to be harder for that woman to integrate into the company if nobody is there to really mentor them. And it's talking about how there are differences in how men are mentored and how men are supported in higher level positions versus women. And it talks about a study where it shows that women who had mentorship in earlier stages of their career were able to grow more. And it actually connects to a general understanding of the importance of a support system and a community to support you. And if many of you have worked in different areas and you can relate to this, because when you enter the team and you find people that you can connect with and can be open about some things that you're vulnerable about, or if you in terms of like I don't know how to do this and etc., that helps you to gain the help that you need. But for women who have passed through all of these barriers to get to that level of job, such an acknowledgement may be not possible if there's no one that will mentor them. And here's sort of like the table, which is really interesting to do. You don't need to remember the details here, but it in terms of you don't have to. I'm not going to ask you what is the solution to attracting candidates or something like that. But look at it; it's really interesting. It's you may one day be somewhere and you may be interested in being cognizant of practicing impartial recruitment of employees and sort of. Or calling out to what is being done, and it offers solutions and it offers a way that we can change it. And I think the recommendations are pretty doable. And so that's the table. It kind of is a sort of like a more narrow version of the stages it offers. The other talent management process to alter is through developing employees, so it's talking about professional development basically. That it's using the example of academia, and then it uses other examples where it talks about how when women are excluded from being invited to professional opportunities, that impacts how well they can develop their professional assets. And it talks about how women are asked to volunteer for duties that doesn't advance their standing development. So it's talking about the opportunities that women have, which relates to the glass escalator. Obviously, this might not be the experience of every man, but this is based on data. So proportionately, if you were to look at experiences of men in comparison to women. And the other one is assessing performance. So, it talks about how assessments shape the path of professionals and it helps them grow and helps them to reach where they need to be. And this is again different for men and women. And it talks about how women suffer what is called a double bind. It's talking about basically the concept that if women in positions of power are aggressive and decisive, and they're in control and they exert characteristics that a good boss and a good hardworking boss would do. Because they're women, it's considered to be not favorable because because of their gender, they're going to be perceived as violating their gender expectations. Whereas if a man has those type of characteristics, such as being sort of aggressive, a workaholic, or being decisive and determined employees, he's going to be looked at as a good boss, as a boss who's in control. But if a woman exerts that sort of characteristics, she's going to be called names. And it's on the other hand, if she's too nourishing or she's caring, has a personal approach in management, then she's going to be penalized because she's going to be seen as less capable and effective. And then the last one is managing compensation and promotion, which is equivalent to the gender gap income, which we already talked about, and it talks about the differences in pay and how that impacts women. And then this one at the end talks about why women don't stay in jobs that treat them this way, and talks about how women who want to grow don't find this environment healthy enough to stay in. And it also talks about the motherhood penalty, which I think is important because it's what we have referred to last week and this week as well, that women, whether they have children or not, they get penalized because of the possibility that they could be mothers. They get fewer opportunities and lower wages than childless women or men who are fathers as well, because they're presumed to be less committed to work, because there's this assumption that if they're mothers, they're committing their whole worth to motherhood. And here it just talks about what I mentioned in the beginning about narrowing the gender gap.